Hi, I'm Ryan Kartje, your LA Times USC beat writer, here for another week of the LA Times College Football Roundtable, joined as always by Ben Bolch, our UCLA beat writer, and Dylan Hernandez, our columnist. Guys, how you doing after a cross-country trip for all of us?
Feel like I need a week off to recover.
I am gonna take a week off. No, I'm kidding. No, we got the Dodgers and about to clinch, so I will be working, unfortunately.
Well, Dylan, you were there in Ann Arbor with me for a epic USC game, one that I think we could both argue they should have won. I just in summation, kind of looking at this loss 27-24 to Michigan, it really turned on three plays, as far as I'm concerned. Three long runs from Michigan's offense. Otherwise, USC's defense held them to essentially 3 yards per play.
Right.
Michigan didn't have any passing offense to speak of. As you wrote in your column, they had 32 yards the whole game allowed by USC's defense, which normally would have won any game, I would think, in any conference. But Dylan, what was it that you noticed that went wrong maybe for USC in this one?
I just thought, to start out that they played Michigan's game, right? I think they kind of did this, like try to establish the run thing. It obviously worked against Utah State, but they weren't playing against Utah State, and I think right last week when we did this, I kind of talked, I think I referenced more like the LSU game, right? Where Miller Moss started getting the ball out, and that, right, in turn kind of opened up the run, and that is kind of what they did in the second half. I just thought, they kind of burned offensively, they burned 2 quarters trying to do it one way before, they kind of started playing their own football, and I do think I mean, I really like Miller Moss, I mean, he got sacked 4 times. He probably could have been sacked 10 times, right? He won't take off with the ball necessarily, but I think he's like very elusive in a way in the pocket. I mean, how many times did he duck under a tackle, right? Probably like at least like 3 times, and then there was also, he feels pressure from behind. He knows how to kind of step up and get rid of the ball. I am a little bit worried about how much he's getting hit. You do start wondering, right? I mean, this is starting to look like Justin Herbert's like rookie year when he was getting hit all the time. And you start wondering, okay, what's going to be kind of the effect of this in the long term? But to me, he really showed, a lot. He brought them back. I mean, I thought, when they went up, honestly, I thought the game was over. Then obviously they had that really unfortunate 3-and-out. And, then they missed one tackle, which, again, I think for the most part, while they had a lot of trouble on the line. I thought for the most part that they tackled pretty well, actually. I thought they played pretty well defensively, given, how they were at such a huge disadvantage at in one part of the field.
You said they tackled well. There was
Yeah.
two missed tackles on that big run, and the reason I'm chiming in here is that they were former Bruins. Kamari Ramsey and John Humphrey whiffed on that big run toward the end of the game, right?
Yeah, and
So
Humphrey had the
that
guy. He had him around the waist. No, but I'm saying like otherwise, like in the game, right? I mean, yeah, that is obviously that was the play that decided the game, right? But I thought for the most part, and really in that second half, as you're kind of watching this game unfold, there was kind of this feel of like, okay, they're going to get the ball back. They're going to get the ball back, right? And as soon as they scored that first touchdown, right, and right, they scored in the first drive, SC did in the second half. Then they get a stop, and you kind of start to feel the momentum starting to shift, right? And there was kind of this feeling of like, okay, they're not going to be able to score. And really, it was just that play.
I'll agree with Dylan here. I do think, while there were some big mistakes on that run, on the other two huge runs, one of which was through a massive hole, which is just clearly an execution sort of communication problem on USC's defense. Other than that, we saw a lot of one-on-one open field tackles. That's something that did not happen last year at any point. This secondary wasn't making those tackles against a 235-pound running back, but they were this time. So, I don't. I know there's a lot of panic about the defense, and 290 rush yards allowed is a lot. But again, if you take away those three rushes, it's a much more manageable number, and would arguably even be a good performance all around by the defense. But I think Dylan was kind of getting at the real issue with USC in this game, and it's a one thing that I think was the biggest difference between the style of play in the LSU game and the style of play in this one. It's that the offensive line was just not good enough, and it's just a matter of these young players stepping into roles that they were certainly not prepared for, at least in this game. Communication was bad. They had trouble dealing with the noise in the stadium, which, as someone who has gone to many Michigan games over the years, I don't really think it's that loud of a stadium, personally. I think it is for the amount of people there, but like certainly could be louder for the amount of people that are there. But the offensive line really struggled with that. And like you said, Miller Moss could have been sacked 10 times. He was pressured 22 times in this game, which is just an inexcusable number. They had to bench their left tackle, their ascending left tackle, Elijah Page, at halftime because they literally could not run the offense with him as the left tackle. You shift the right tackle over to left. You move, a project right tackle and Tobias Raymond into the starting role. He did okay. I mean, there's just not a lot of options up front. And I think that really falls on both Lincoln Riley and his offensive line coach, Josh Henson, who explained the fact that they weren't bringing in a lot of transfers on the offensive line because they wanted to trust the development of the young guys that were there. I'm not sure they trust them that much anymore. And I think, certainly Lincoln Riley and Josh Henson are going to have to figure something out here in these next couple of weeks. Now, granted, they have a team in Wisconsin that hasn't been able to conjure up much of a pass rush at all. So maybe this is kind of a soft landing spot for the offensive line to gain its confidence back. But it's certainly not looking good. And, I want to jump into UCLA here real quick in a minute. But Dylan, just before we do, I know you wrote a lot about Lincoln Riley and his, play calling, just general management of this game. And I know a lot of fans have been frustrated coming out of this game with that. Just wanted to give you the floor to talk a little bit about your thoughts on Lincoln.
In the last few weeks that we've done this, I've kind of talked about how you get the feeling right now that SC is like not going to beat itself, right? And because again, like for the most part, again, they're tackling well, for the most part, like they're not turning the ball over, right? Although Miller Moss had a pretty bad pick six, but like, for the most part, they're keeping the ball. They're not doing like outrageously, shooting themselves in the foot type stuff. And, kind of like the one thing that kind of makes you uncertain is honestly at this point, Lincoln Riley, and even kind of going back to that LSU game, the way he handled some of those, right? Late, with the clock winding down, those situations wasn't great, and again, they, with 5 minutes left, they get the ball, and it's 3 and out, right? 2 consecutive, I'm sure he didn't design, Miller Moss getting pressured and just having to shovel past the ball, but, nonetheless, like the called pass plays there, it didn't work out, right? And I think they burned less than a minute there, gave gave Michigan the ball back with 4 minutes left, and so that to me is kind of like one area where, you're uncertain, right? And I think usually when you look at championship teams, you're thinking, okay, well, I trust the coach to kind of make the right decisions, where the questions are always, again, about, right, and, especially in college, you're always mixing in young players. You're trying to integrate and develop people. And, there are going to be growing pains kind of associated with that. And I think that's part of this game, and everybody understands that, right? And, and again, when you're striving for like a championship, those are the question marks that you have, right? Rather than kind of with the head coach here. And so, to me, that's still kind of a question mark. It was a big question mark for me, with the LSU game. I know they kind of came out winning that thing, but I think if they had lost that, it would have kind of been the same thing, right? You'd be wondering, okay, did Lincoln Riley blow this one? And certainly they get, you had the feel here with this game.
Perfect segue into a team that actually did blow a game against LSU in UCLA. Ben was in Baton Rouge for this game. Ben, I know we asked you this last week, but coming out of another loss, what's the tone surrounding this team?
Well, it's kind of like the classic half full, half empty glass situation, right? I mean, the people who see progress can say, well, UCLA battled for a half. They were tied at halftime in one of the toughest environments in college football. They finally got their offense going. They weren't getting beat on every drive, and they showed a lot of fight. But the flip side of that is that, in the second half, all the same issues came up again. Offense stalled, the running game couldn't go anywhere, and they couldn't get any pressure on the quarterback. So, it's like, do you believe in baby steps are going to lead to something, or are you a bottom line results person? And, until they can parlay that first half into, let's say, an upset of Oregon or an upset of Penn State, I don't know that it's really going to mean that much. So, I think these next 2 weeks will be very telling as to whether this is, really a sign of a team on the upswing or just a team that's, not completely flatlined and, still has a pulse, but is going to pretty much get beaten up the rest of the season.
I have so many questions about the run game and how the one thing that the coach has experience doing seems to
Yeah.
not be working in this case. I
And the
mean,
offensive coordinator, both NFL running backs.
and yet TJ Harden has 7 carries for 15 yards in this game.
Yeah.
What ails the run game right now? What's
It's
not working?
multifaceted. I mean, I think first of all, they're not running enough. They're not allowing these guys to get in rhythm. But part of that is that Eric Bieniemy is a very pass-heavy offensive coordinator, so they've skewed heavy toward the pass. And then I'll be honest, the offensive line blocking's been pretty atrocious, and they moved some guys around. They had a walk-on starting at right guard against LSU, and that's just kind of the state of where they are with recruiting and depth right now is that they had to have a walk-on come in there, Nicky Prongros. And actually he was one of the better players. So just breakdowns across the board, schematically not the best. And TJ Harden basically hasn't looked like the same guy since spring practice. Everybody noticed in spring practice he did not have the same burst as last season. So something's going on there, but the one bright spot in the running game, Jalen Berger broke off a nice 13-yard run, mid-transfer from Michigan State. He got into the mix late in the game. Deshaun Foster says he'll be in the mix more heavily going forward. So if you're a UCLA fan, that's one potential thing to look forward to.
Oh, he broke off a 13-yard run, huh?
Well, when you're averaging like, 2.7 yards per carry.
When he said broke off, I was expecting to hear like a 40.
I'm not gonna lie, I thought the same thing in that moment. It was really just a letdown when you said 13. Oh man,
Oh,
That's
boy.
like Deshaun says, baby steps.
It speaks to the state of things, right?
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
baby
mean,
steps.
like I wrote in my game story, the two issues with this team, no run game and no pass rush. They have not had a sack since the Hawaii game. That's 2 games against Indiana, which you've got to believe does not have one of the better offensive lines in the Big Ten, and LSU, which probably does have one of the better lines in the SEC. But you got to get some kind of pressure on the quarterback, and they moved Olufemi Oladejo from linebacker to edge rusher against LSU, and it really made no appreciable difference. So they're really searching for some answers right now, and there's a lack of talent, there's a lack of bodies. And it's just, how do you scheme around that, right? I mean, that's the challenge facing Akaika Malloy.
Well, fortunately, they have a soft landing spot next. Oh no, wait, it's number 8 Oregon. Uh-oh. I mean, is there any hope that they can turn this around? I feel like this is just going dark.
In 5 years.
Oregon, I think Oregon is highly overrated. I was just looking at their stats. They are number 6 in the Big Ten in offense. That's their strong suit, and they are number 11 in defense. So this is not like a world beater by any stretch. And we saw them struggle in their first 2 games and kind of have to pull them out before kind of getting things rolling in the Civil War a couple of weeks ago. But I don't think this is like a juggernaut Oregon team. And then you add in an 8 p.m. start, which is UCLA's latest since 1990 at the Rose Bowl. Well, goes back even further, but it's their latest since 1990 period. Maybe some Big Ten after dark weirdness is just what UCLA needs to kind of get this rolling right now. But, if they can't solve those 2 issues that I mentioned earlier, the run game and the pass rush, nothing's going to matter.
They're going to need some food poisoning to win this game, man. I mean, Ben, you sound like you're calling the upset. Are you calling it?
I'm not calling it. I'm just saying that there are some ingredients there. And also, let's not forget that one thing I'll be tracking, Dylan Gabriel actually committed briefly to UCLA before Dorian decided to come back. Dorian Thompson-Robinson decided to come back for that extra year. And then the backup, Dante Moore, was Mr. Pick Six for the Bruins last year. I think there will be a chip on the shoulder to kind of get some pressure and get the best of those guys, especially among the veteran UCLA players. Now, I'm not going to say UCLA is going to win, but I do feel that this has the environment potential for an upset.
Well, they were supposed to lose by 4 touchdowns, and they only lost by 2, so maybe maybe one of those upsets where they cover the spread.
That's where the team
I'll,
is. Yeah.
what I
24
heard is
point underdogs.
what I
Hey,
heard
while
is
we're at it here,
Garbers for Heisman. Well,
I want to touch real quick, Ryan, on Reggie Bush and this thing. I mean, this is a college football, what do you kind of make of this whole thing? Are you surprised at all?
I'm not surprised. I do find it fascinating, if only, and just to, for anyone who doesn't know, Reggie Bush and his legal team just announced and just filed a lawsuit against USC, the Pac-12, and the NCAA, alleging that, you know, they kept him from earning NIL money during his time in college. Obviously, had there been NIL at that time, Reggie Bush would have been a very rich man as a college student. But what's so fascinating to me about this situation isn't so much that he is suing the NCAA, which he was already suing for a defamation suit, or the Pac-12. It's that he's suing USC, which a couple weeks ago, I actually spoke to Reggie Bush about his love of USC and how he couldn't wait to finally arrange shit so that he can lead the team out of the tunnel. And they were trying to find a date to do that. I don't think that date is going to happen anymore, I'm guessing. And it's interesting because USC really has made some inroads to try to repair that relationship, even though some people might argue that they don't need to, that maybe Reggie is the one who should be making those inroads. But still, USC kind of swallowed its pride, realized, hey, maybe it will be good for us to welcome back this legend into the fold. And Reggie, I think that's probably done now. Obviously, when you're suing your old university, I don't imagine that's going to be a happy relationship going forward. We haven't heard much from USC on the issue, but I will be curious to hear where this goes next, because I actually think there's probably a better case that Reggie Bush has than his defamation suit against the NCAA. But how they go about this, whether it ends up just being sort of a publicity stunt versus maybe the same thing the 83 NCAA tournament winning team from NC State is kind of going after the same NIL money. We'll see. A lot still to happen on that front. But I wanted to ask you guys this after. It's been 4 weeks now that these two teams have been in the Big Ten. Now they've only each played one game in the Big Ten, but just wondering what you guys think of the conference as a whole. Is it as competitive as you thought it would be? Does it feel like these two teams belong in the Big Ten? I know, Dylan, we were in Ann Arbor, obviously very Big Ten in cultural and every other way. What did you think just of that arranged marriage, I guess, for lack of a better phrase?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think for we ran into a lot of them, right? Fans kind of traveling out, making connecting flights to get to these places. It's very inconvenient for them. But I think otherwise, like, as far as if you just kind of take the game day itself, and not taking into account the travel and everything, I think it's great. And sure they can play, right? I mean, then and I don't really think, sure you have to adjust up to a certain point, you do, right? But these were things that they were going to have to do anyway. Right. I mean, that they didn't have size on the line, right? Or that they couldn't tackle. It's not like if you're in the Pac-12 that's going to win you championships. So I think all these things are just kind of right. They probably put a spotlight on some points of emphasis that they were going to probably emphasize anyway. Right. And no, I think it's going to be fine. I think these things, right. And over time, we're going to have games where things get heated and rivalries are going to start developing, and it's going to be kind of weird, right? Where it's, you never know, right? SC, Michigan State, who knows, in 10 years is maybe this big thing because something kind of happens, one of these games. But, I think for the first few years, it's going to be kind of fun, just kind of making these trips. I've never been to the big house before, and, so yeah, I think, I mean, did we have to go to Tempe? Did we have to go to Pullman? With all due respect.
I certainly didn't.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, I think, do they belong there? Absolutely. SC is one of the biggest brands in college football, and UCLA is kind of the thing that comes attached to it, right? It's the parasite that's kind of stuck to the bigger fish.
Yeah, I will say, no Big Ten trips yet for UCLA, but I did notice on my flight back from Houston, a connecting flight after leaving Baton Rouge, it was kind of like this slice of life snapshot of what this is now, because we had UCLA fans coming back from Baton Rouge, we had USC fans coming back from Ann Arbor, and we had the UCLA women's soccer team, which had just beaten Indiana, Purdue, and Purdue on there as well. So that's going to be the kind of fun, unexpected kind of convergence of this conference. And I think things like that are pretty cool.
Now that's stupid, right? Like women's soccer should not be going to like Indiana to play. Like they need to just have football should just be football and everything else should just be everything else, I think. Maybe basketball, right? But
Well,
everything
I just thought of this. I mean, they played at Indiana, Purdue. Why are they taking a connecting flight in Houston? Like geographically, however you say that word, that doesn't make any sense.
geographically.
Geographically, I did go to Northwestern. Um, that doesn't make any sense, right? So if you're gonna play at Indiana and Purdue, you got at least got to get a flight out of Chicago. Well, you don't need to go down to Houston. So that's kind of the thing. That's the logistic part of this that I'll be watching, stuff that just
It's
doesn't.
about money, Ben. It's about money. That's why they did this and they're on that flight because it's going to save them money. This is all about money. And that's why that team should not be on that plane.
Well, they won both games, 2 shutouts, so we'll see if they can keep it up.
Yeah, how much money did that make them? Ryan, real quick, this was kind of a big return to Michigan for you. I know you grew up in the area, you went to the University of Michigan, and I again, I'm a big believer that, again, these games in and them of themselves don't have like value, right? What gives it value is kind of what it means to people. And I know that this was kind of a meaningful return for you. So if you could maybe tell us a little bit about your weekend.
Yeah, it was especially cool for me, having grown up going to the big house at least once a year with my dad. It was kind of our thing that we had together. My grandpa had season tickets. We would always get at least one just for the two of us. So this year was emotional a little bit for me just because I lost my dad a couple months ago to a heart attack at 61. So being back in the stadium was it was a heavy experience for me, but also nice. It can really sort of feel his presence there. And while Dylan was taking time to finish his column after the game, it fortunately gave me about 20 or 30 minutes to just sort of sit in the stadium, completely no one else there other than a couple of people working on the field, and just kind of have a moment to talk to him and really just sort of breathe it all in, which was when you're in a stadium that's like 110,000 people and it's empty. There's like a weird power to that, which I thought was, I certainly felt that more this time than I had in a long time. But it was nice to sort of be there and kind of feel him for a minute and think about the memories we had together. One of which he would probably he'd probably be upset for me to share, but I didn't get a chance to share it in the newsletter. But it is now a Big Ten story, I guess. That one year we went together to Michigan, Washington at the Big House, and he wanted to leave in the fourth quarter because he wanted to beat the traffic. And it looked like Michigan was down 2 touchdowns. Looked like it was over. Or sorry, they were down 10 points. Or 9 points. Looked like it was over. They they force a fumble right after we left, and my dad's like, "It's fine. There's no way they're gonna come back." And the next 4 minutes were like one of the greatest comebacks in the history of Michigan football, and they end up kicking a 50-yard field goal to win the game. And the guy who kicked it was a walk-on kicker who had never kicked a field goal, or maybe kicked one field goal in his life. I actually later went on to interview him for a story about how he got pancreatic cancer and actually has survived since. But as we're walking out of the stadium, people are driving past, singing "Hail to the Victors," honking the horn. And my dad has just never been so devastated in his life that we left this game. And he tells me, he's like, "Son, we are never leaving a game early again. Don't you ever make this mistake. And also, don't ever tell anyone that this happened." So now I've told a lot of people, I guess, or the dozens that listen to our video feed. But no, it is a nice thing of the Big Ten, or, USC being in the Big Ten, that now, my mom is certainly happy that she can see me. And I also brought my 1-year-old son to Ann Arbor, which will probably be the only time I ever do that on a work trip ever again. So, but we survived. We're here. And you survived another video of our college football roundtable. Ben, Dylan, thanks for joining us. We'll be back in week 5 as USC takes on Wisconsin. Ben, UCLA takes on, remind me?
Oregon.
Oh yeah, that's right. I made a joke about this. Dear God. It's week 5 and I'm already losing it. But on that note, thanks for joining us, guys.